Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast, and maybe the best electric dog and pony show around. Sponsored by our Patreon supporters. My name is Colin Cox.
My name is John Phelps. Colin,
what's your circus name?
I instinctively, I wanted to use the word Fanny for some reason. I don't know why.
So just Fanny.
Just Fanny.
Not like John the Fantastic or something. You're just Fanny.
Just Fanny.
Just
People
Fanny.
would not even know how to they would say, now what is Fanny's deal? What does Fanny do? Who knows? Who knows? Just Fanny.
He does impressions of hucksters from New York. You should hear his huckster from New York impression. It's very
wonderful.
Good.
It's incredible.
Yeah. Well, John, speaking of adopting roles, we are here to discuss season... That's good.
You're full of them tonight.
It's not. I am. Season 5, Episode 10 of Community Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. This is their second D&D episode, John. This episode originally aired on March the 20th, 2014, written by, this is not a joke, Matt Roller.
Matt Roller. Huh.
Matt Roller.
That one's not even that funny, but I like that it got you.
It's just, that doesn't feel like a real last name.
Roller?
I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. Clearly there's at least one or two. I don't know.
Okay. Directed by one of them Russo fellas.
Yeah, the good one. Maybe? I cannot.
We don't know.
I do not. What, it's Joe and
Anthony.
David?
Anthony. David. It's Renee.
It's Renee.
Oh, classic joke.
That was actually really good.
Oh, man.
Oh, John, this is your IMDb plot summary. The group proposes a, quote, sequel to Dungeons and Dragons Night when they need to get a skeptical Professor Hickey to bond with his estranged son. That's good.
Okay. All right. Oh,
what do we think? What do we think the person who wrote this thinks Hickey skeptical of? Is he skeptical of D&D? Is he what's the skepticism?
See, this is why you're an English professor, because you're always trying to figure that out. I don't know. Skeptical of... I don't think he's skeptical of D&D. He seems to just jump right into it, so...
He does, but he doesn't follow the rules we learn early.
Well,
so.
I have a lot of questions about how they're playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, no, I thought this was really nice for people who really enjoyed the last episode about D&D. I know John is an experienced D&D player, so you can certainly talk to us about the verisimilitude of this game.
What a word.
Game?
No, first one. You're hilarious. They got about everything wrong, is what I'll say, as far as the rules go. They didn't even bother to try to learn. They just went, who cares?
Well, it is interesting because Annie says, we play D&D, but I guess, I mean, this is the point of a game, I guess, is to some degree you just make your own rules. And from what you've communicated to me, they seem to just make up their own rules. No, that's not true. Okay, I understand. Well, John, before we discuss a bit of context, okay, on ABC, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland at 2.5.
Wait, did we beat them?
No.
Okay.
No.
Fuck.
We were close. I'll say this again. Well, I'll get there. On CBS, NCAA basketball, Woodford versus Stanford at 2.5.
Bum, 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 bum. I don't know any of these teams. Woodford, is that what you said?
That's okay. This doesn't look like the real name to a college, but yeah, it says Woodford. I guess Woodford University. That's
where they make. No. That's the university you go to learn how to make the delicious bourbon, Woodford bourbon.
Yeah,
that's why Stanford beat them, because they were all louses out there, just fucking hammered on the court, can't even walk.
And regrettably, the Woodford point guard just vomited in the mop bucket for the second time this evening. He must be dehydrated. No, you shouldn't give him bourbon because that'll make you more dehydrated. Woodford, how did they even make it into this tournament? Yeah, no, Stanford probably won.
Yeah.
John, the big winner on Fox, Hell's Kitchen at 3.2.
You fucking donkey! I know I make that joke, but
every time
you have to say it. Gordon Ramsay, God bless him. He's looking old now. He's looking like Skeletor a little bit. This man is. Used to, I thought he was a beautiful man. I thought he was a beautiful, angry boy. But I saw him recently. Age catches up to us all. You know, it is what it is. He's looking like Frank Langella in Masters of the Universe.
Well, this is what happens when you embrace the dark side. It destroys your physical appearance.
Yeah, of course.
So, no, I can't say. I mean, this is saying something coming from me. Those T-shirts might be a little too tight, Gordon. And that is something coming from me. So,
well, you've gotten better. You used to have. When I first met Colin's got a very good physique. He always has. When I first met him, he liked to show the physique off a lot more than
what would
now.
I do?
Oh, you wore some tight shirts.
Oh, did
baggy
I? Okay.
jeans, that was what was in.
Yeah.
Puka shell necklace, beanie. All the time, constantly. Sure. That was the look. That's the look you rolled with.
I was just poor. I just grew into those shirts. That's the thing.
Oh shit! No, you didn't. You got whatever shirt would show off your fucking guns, dude. I know that.
Well, hey, there's a Second Amendment in this country, and goddamn it, I like to. Yeah. I do not like to conceal and carry. Thank you very much, John. On NBC Community at 2.1.
What if no one knew, and this was the episode where we just found out you're really into guns? We never talked about it. It's just you're really in. You're just really.
Go, yeah, I just get really weird. Yeah.
Yeah, I love big guns. Oh, anyway, 2.1. This episode of Community.
Oh, the one thing I wanted to tell you, John, though, beat Parks and Rec at 8:30 by maybe 0.2 of a point. Parks and Rec.
What season are we in?
Parks and Rec?
Yeah, season 1.
No, it's 2014. This is well into Parks and Rec at this point.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, no. Like, this is a thing we talk about quite often. Like, Community's numbers are low, but they're often they're often competitive with what follows, or in some cases they just beat either Parks and Rec or in some cases The Office. Now, maybe that like what 18 to 35 demographic, maybe those shows capture more of that demographic, but the overall viewership it's consistent with the rest of NBC, which is terrible, but it's just worth mentioning that. So,
how did NBC survive during? They always lose. Their shows always lose. That's fucking wild, right?
Well, 30 Rock always makes this joke, right? If you watch, so this was the whole thing, especially when Community ran on NBC, was NBC had these wonderfully experimental comedies, but no one was watching them really. So 30 Rock, The Office, Parks and Recreation, Community. I don't know, John, because boy, they were in the 90s and early aughts with Frasier, Seinfeld, Friends. They were the place to be. So
I was gonna say they were like the kings of that time slot of like any like sitcoms during the week. That's what you watch.
Thursday, yeah.
That's fascinating.
Without question.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Now they're just. I mean, I'm glad they're doing that. I think I like their shows a lot more than anybody else. What they'll put out.
Yeah.
Far and away.
Think about all the jokes. Oh, that's a really good movie too. But think about all the jokes we would make about shows. It's not a bad movie, kids. I mean,
Far and Away, the one with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Where he's supposed to be Irish.
That's the one.
Can I ask a question? Did you do like a lot? Sure. Did you eat a lot of weed gummies before you watched Far and Away, or
watched it several times?
No, you have not.
Every time.
There ain't no fucking way you've watched that movie several times.
I promise I have.
You have watched that movie more than Tom Cruise for sure. Then
maybe I cannot. We're not friends.
Far and Away is
it at least.
Okay, I've lost a little bit of respect for you. Anyway,
it's Tom Cruise is very charming in it.
All right, this episode of Community.
The pan when he's about to box and he has his arms in the air and Nicole Kidman watches him. That's a really lovely shot.
Regular Scorsese shot.
Sure, I mean, but it's a Ron Howard film, so he's just
Ron Howard.
Scorsese was there that day.
Is boring Scorsese.
Listen, I would not disagree with you. He really is. He's boring Scorsese. Yeah,
he's the poor man's Scorsese. Far and away is the poor man's Raging Bull.
It really is. That's fair. Again, I agree with everything you are saying.
I just want the podcast now to be talking about the fact that Colin has watched Far and Away several times. That's wild.
At least two. Yeah.
Okay, that's not several. That's just 2 times. Anyway, let's talk about the episode. God damn, Colin.
My dad was divorced in the 90s. What else did we do? We watched Far and Away.
No, you did. That's not the divorced dad movie. The divorced dad movie is like Days of Thunder. That's what you watch.
Oh, we watched that too. Yeah,
Tango and Cash. That's a divorced dad movie.
Never watched that one. No,
Con Air. Oh, that's a hard hitting one.
That was a bit later. That was like late 90s. No, this man loved Far and Away. Yeah, really loved Far and Away. Also, this is something funny. What's the Verhoeven film that ruined the Saved by the Bell cast members?
Showgirls.
John, the man said, because he would rent movies and then he had the double deck, so he would then record them. So he would have a library, right?
I'm sure he did, yes.
Yeah, he did. John, the man claimed that he watched Showgirls because he needed to see what all of the fuss was about. And by fuss, he meant fuzz, and by fuzz, he meant vagina. Anyway, he never said it was code. But yeah, no, these are real things he said to me. Yeah.
Isn't it wild that Paul Verhoeven directed Showgirls?
Isn't it?
His records like RoboCop, Total Recall, Starship Troopers. What's the next logical step? I'll direct Showgirls, where Kyle MacLachlan
John,
and
that
Elizabeth Berkley have
it's wild, yeah,
the wildest sex scene in the history of film.
I mean, I guess tentatively, we're not delaying a conversation about this episode. I have a lot to say. Should you and I watch and discuss this as adults? Because I haven't watched it. I don't even know if I've ever watched it before. I've seen parts and pieces.
It's
literally and figuratively. So
it's incredibly bad. I would much rather watch like a really good Verhoeven movie. I don't want to watch that one.
Well, I just thought I would propose it.
If you want us to watch Showgirls, please tell us. If we get like if 5 people say watch Showgirls, we'll watch it for Patreon. There you go.
That's what we'll do. Or we might even release this if it's 5 non-patrons.
Sure.
You can email us, find us on Twitter. Ugh. We're also on Blue Sky now. But yeah, if you want us to watch and discuss this, we'll make it available on the main feed. At least 5.
We will watch Showgirls proper now. Can we talk about this goddamn episode of the show Community? It's not a very good one. I enjoyed it okay, Colin.
It's not a very good one, but Tobias is in it.
So Tobias is in very bad episodes of Arrested Development. In fact, some of the worst ones, I would say. By the end, we thought Tobias was basically like an abuser, is sort of how we looked at the man.
Basically, no, he's without question. So
I think it's an episode I enjoyed watching the first time.
Okay.
Production wise, I think it's really good. They do a lot of great camera stuff. The play on, I think, like Pippin's song maybe is what they're playing on.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
I feel like that's what that is. That's a play on Pippin's song when he's singing with Gandalf next to him in, I guess, Two Towers is when that's happening.
That's in Return of the King, and it's actually
okay.
Gandalf isn't there. It's is it Denethor maybe?
Oh, Denethor. You're right. Yeah.
You know the tomatoes, the tomato eating. Yeah. It's like this really visceral, like, dinner scene. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Okay, so Pippin... No, there's a scene where Pippin's singing on a balcony. Is that scene?
No, he and Gandalf are talking on a balcony, and that's
Okay,
when
I'm confusing it all. I've created a music video in my head, a
that's when
tapestry
the
of all
green.
these
No,
things.
I mean it all just collides together. I mean, this is really my experience with Far and Away. But yeah, no, like the gold. No, it's green. It's green. There's like this green light that shoots into the air.
Sure. Yeah.
And
Okay.
Pippin gets scared, and yeah, that's a lovely little.
But
sequence
that's
too.
what that reminded me of. There's a scene where the dean is genuinely jerking off to a picture of Jeff Winger.
It's the same one.
That happens in
It's
this episode.
It's like a season 1 press photo that he keeps at his bedside. I think we learned this in season 6. That's what that is. Yeah.
Well, he masturbates to it.
He basically is.
Genuinely.
Yeah. Strokes his sword. Yeah.
I think apart from the dean and Chang, there were not a lot of laughs from me in this episode.
Yeah.
It's a fast episode to the point where like the dialogue becomes overwhelming at some point.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the way they got into the story was like laughably sitcom, and I guess that's what they're going for. I would assume. But yeah, I think the episode is it's not nearly as challenging as the first episode. And they even go so far as to say it. I think they are acknowledging that this one will be a little bit more lighthearted than that first one. You know, because they even talked about like keeping Neil from committing suicide. Like that's something that is actually said at the beginning of the episode. So like,
Yeah.
it's definitely not as heavy-handed. Hickey is great. He's great in this. I should not have said I don't think it's a bad episode. It's just not a very funny episode.
Fair.
And on watching it a second time, I didn't care that much about it. That's how I feel.
No, I think I would agree with almost everything you said. I think it is, compared to the first D&D episode, just admittedly not as good. But this is what's interesting, John, because I don't think you've watched all of season 5, and I have. So this is an episode, and we saw this actually earlier in the season as I described it, this series or trilogy of episodes that explored what the loss of Troy meant or means to this show. John, this is an episode that seems to begin this interesting conversation the show wants to have about storytelling. And this is not new to Community. This is a show that actively thinks about itself as constructing stories and narratives, but it becomes more interesting and overt because think about how the episode ends. I would argue the episode ends with this interesting injunction toward what it means, what we all want from stories often, which is the deferment of the end. And I talk to my students about this a lot with romantic comedies. I love the romantic comedy genre. I think formally it's fascinating, but the thing, and you know this, right? The romantic comedy almost always ends the moment the boy gets the girl back. I mean, watch a lot of Hallmark romantic comedies. John, the credits just play over the two of them embracing, right? Because it's just, we're done, right? Story finished, right? And I think the way this episode ends in this exploration of what we ultimately want from stories, the way we want that ending deferred almost indefinitely is super fascinating. I think it is interesting to focus an episode on Hickey. I'm trying to think. We've had a couple of maybe smaller narratives about him. This is one of the first times, at least from my recollection this season, where we've had a Hickey narrative. But I agree with you. For me, I never really gave this episode a lot of thought when I've watched it in the past. But actually watching it for this episode, I was completely unaware of just how beautiful this episode is. There are so many fascinating filmmaking choices.
Oh, yeah.
That Russo makes. I mean, a lot of dynamic camera movement. There's this thing that happens when Hickey interrogates Abed. This is something, it's a way of basically eliminating the middle ground to make a character who is perhaps in the background and a character in the foreground seem to be sharing the same space. Like, those kinds of choices are fascinating for a sitcom to make. And we say this about Community a lot, but I think that's really the one thing that I would want to just discuss in as much detail as we can is just the filmmaking craft of this episode. And as you said, like the way that it makes, I mean, I don't recall the first D&D episode. I mean, maybe there were some references to Lord of the Rings, but there's like Lord of the Rings references here. There's like interesting maybe Red Wedding stuff happening here. I don't know where Game of Thrones is at this point, but some of it feels like Game of Thrones when Britta makes that reference to things getting red, you know? Like that doesn't, how do you not think of Game of Thrones at that point?
Oh, sure. Okay.
But John, I think maybe a good place to start, and you mentioned this earlier. Talk to us a little bit about how this episode maybe departs from D&D as a game that people play, and talk to us about how they adapt this game for this episode and the sorts of changes they make.
In D&D, like, every person gets to roll their dice. That's a big deal.
Okay.
This would have been the time when, like, third or fourth edition's out, and you never, like, so now there are fifth edition's what's out right now, and that is like an edition that a lot of new players can get into because it's a lot more theater of the mind, which is what Abed is doing. Before that, D&D was a very tactics based game. So like you'd have a big graph and there'd be squares drawn, and you'd have like a little miniature representing you, and you'd like move, and you'd have to like flank enemies and, you know, figure out where you're going to go and roll your attacks, and they get some of that right, especially when at the end it's just Hank and Hickey left, and Hank's like, I want to use this spell. Well, in D&D you get like you get 5 spells a day, and so he's used it all. So like that, they did get that right. But for the most part, it's a lot more slow paced. That's number one. There's no moment when 75 people are yelling at things they want to do.
Oh, okay. Now I understand.
And a dungeon master's like, ha 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 ha. That does not happen at all. It's also fascinating because the way Abed DMs, and this is something that a lot of people argue about. For the most part, I think a DM in a game where they want to get like through a mission or a story, they're always on your side. So they will always try to point you towards an objective to get things done. And as players, you understand that. And so Hank immediately throwing a wrench into that would be a player that, like, if I was DMing a game, I would probably ask him to leave. I would say, I don't want you involved in this.
So you know, that kind of like chaos is typically not acceptable, you would say.
It's acceptable, but it's like it's fucking annoying. And okay, if you're a DM that's like not really on your toes, you're gonna have a hard time trying to just come up with something off the top of your head to deal with a character like that, especially when you've said, here's your objectives, you should do these objectives. And I think that's like an unspoken thing. Like, you want to go, when he's like, there's a tower, there's a necromancer, you should kill the necromancer. That's what you want to do. But I think there are characters who are chaotic and purposefully do these things to make everybody work harder. And I think that's immediately what puts a bad taste in my mouth about Hank as a character. I just genuinely don't like this guy whatsoever. I don't know how you felt about him. But anyway, that's sort of how they do it. They definitely adapt the rules so that Abed takes priority with all the acting, all the voices, all the roles, which he should do as a DM. He plays all those characters, but he also is like rolling for everyone, which wouldn't happen. That's a big thing. And he also is doing it so fucking breakneck speed that you can't catch your breath and figure out what's happening. But you have to. It's a show. You can't just film a table and people rolling a dice, you know. I think they adapted it as well as they could, yeah.
I mean, I was thinking the same thing, right? There's absolutely no way, and maybe it's just because of storytelling pacing, there's no way every character can roll the die. You need a single character to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perhaps for everything, John, from blocking purposes to just think about how much they have 22 minutes, right? Even if think about every time someone rolls a die, if you're wasting 3 to 5 seconds, that's important time in a 22-minute episode. So I agree with you. Like, that kind of adapting makes complete sense to me. You know, we talked about Pierce as that chaotic character in the first D&D episode. And even to have someone like Neil suggest that being that kind of chaotic character made the game the best game of D&D he ever played, it certainly feels like they want Hank to do that here, but I don't know. There's a couple of reasons. Why do you think it doesn't take here in the way that it obviously took with Pierce?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
again, like if what's the point of the first D&D episode if Pierce does not create that large overarching conflict? It's obvious that's what Hank is here to do, but it doesn't work. I agree with you. I think there's something lost, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, because we've just met this guy, whereas like with
Gotcha.
Pierce, he's been, a villain, quote unquote. He's sort of been the outcast, overshadowed character in the show for, I think that's what, 3 seasons in now that this is happening. So it makes sense that they would, point that to him and let the that's really an episode where everyone's sort of airing grievances, and
Hmm.
also Pierce is coming to terms with kind of his role, even though they don't really do much after that,
Hmm.
as far as him being a quote unquote evil guy. Um, so I think for Pierce, it also makes sense because Pierce is an old man who does not understand Dungeons and Dragons, whereas we understand, through context clues, Hank plays D&D a lot. It's like his
Hmm.
favorite thing apparently. So I think it's just a bother versus Pierce. Pierce
Hmm.
is like a character development, and Hank is just some asshole that we just
Hmm.
met.
And it's interesting because, Pierce becomes, if you remember, an expert because he reads all of those guides. So he and Hank by the end are not so dissimilar because of what Pierce learns. But I do agree with you. I think it's just because we don't know Hank. But I think this is an interesting episode when thinking about perspective and point of view in those terms because
Sure.
John, imagine if Community was a show about Hickey, this conflict would make so much more sense. And I think the way the narrative divides our time between Hickey and Hank and the way different characters seem to, let us say, pledge allegiance to Hank, for example, I think like the episode does this interesting thing where it doesn't give us all of the information about these characters and their dynamics. So we, like the characters in the study group, are left to decide who we think tells the truth, who we can trust. And that's an interesting way of telling a story because, again, it uses that gap or that lack of knowledge and information to really drive the narrative. And I think in that respect, it absolutely works. And I guess we can talk about Hank a little bit. Did it, well, I think you said what you think about Hank. Did it surprise you how quickly it seems that characters like Chang and Britta believed him and really seemed to embrace him as this aggrieved figure? Because I don't know, Jeff, Shirley, Annie, I don't know what they really fight for aside from we just need to end this game. But Chang and Britta become loyal soldiers to Hank, it seems, in ways that I don't think Annie and Jeff do.
Well, I mean, we've seen that Chang is maybe not the brightest of people, especially lately. They've seemed to turn him into some type of bumbling jester. You know,
Fully Flanderized him a little bit, it
absolutely,
seems.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's fucking so dumb. And Britta is a character who is easily persuaded by someone who can speak well, and that's we're shown from the outset that Hank is like super charismatic. He's very to the point with what he's saying. He knows the game forward and backwards. So I think he's obviously very good at I think persuading Britta to get on his side. I don't think it would take much. I think she just needs to hear something in a certain tone and she is ready to go.
And who's to say how stoned she is? But also, like, when I think about, because
That's
it's not
true.
just, yeah, I mean, it's not just like sophistry, right? He makes an argument. So his point is Hickey was a terrible father. He was absent for most of my life. And now, hey, what does he want? He wants, and it's not like, at least as Hank seems to describe it, and this seems consistent with what we know of Hickey as a character, he doesn't seem interested in acknowledging his mistakes or in maybe even apologizing. Maybe, I mean, this is an interesting moment. Maybe I'm just reading a bit into or over determining the things Hank says, but Hank makes this argument that Hickey was not a good father. What do I owe him? And that seems to work for both Chang and Britta, but I wonder, does it work for us as the audience? Do we believe Hank at all, or do we think this is a narrative that is suspect? I just, as I mean,
Yeah.
you and I both, I think if we were on Hank's team, we might find that argument persuasive, considering,
Yeah.
our relationships with our fathers.
Yeah. I think like it's all like semantic. You could argue this all day, like the difference between like a bad father and an absent father. I think there is
Sure, yeah.
some type of a difference, and Hickey seems to, from what we can understand, is a workaholic. For a majority of his life, who probably was a cop, and
Yeah.
as a cop, as a detective, you are on the worst shifts, worst hours, constantly working, especially if you're in a place that's prone to have crimes where you have to go out at all hours of the night. So, I think there's a difference, but some people can say being an absent father is a bad father also. Who am I to say? So
Right.
yeah, I think we probably would have been persuaded, but I also think that there's an argument to be made that Hickey at the time was trying his best. As far as I could tell, I don't think he would purposefully not want to be around his son.
Yeah, and it's also like this is something Meg and I talk about a lot. What a child needs in relation to what you can give them. If a
Yeah.
child needs more than you can give them, from that child's perspective, and perhaps they are justified in thinking this, you were then neglectful. And I think
Right.
that's again, but I think the episode is really smart about this, that it's difficult to say, like, what is the distinction, as you said, between being abusive and neglectful? What is the distinction between a child needing more, a parent giving them everything they can, but the child then, as they grow, creating or constructing this narrative that, well, my father was neglectful because they didn't give me what I needed. Well, perhaps they gave the best they could. This is a conversation, John, that my mother and I have had multiple times. She would always say, your father gave everything he could. And there's reasons maybe to challenge that, but considering what I know of the man, I think maybe that's true. He was wildly neglectful, but I don't know if he could have been any different, right? And
Sure.
I was thinking about all of those conversations, and if you're listening to this and you had, whether it's a father or a mother or parents who were neglectful, I'm sure you've had those kinds of thoughts and conversations as well, right? What's the difference between someone who's actively neglectful and someone who just gives everything they can, but it was just never enough? And that's not to say that you as the child were asking for too much. You needed what you needed, but I guess the point is it's just incredibly complicated. And I think the
Yeah.
episode is really quite smart about not giving us some definitive answer, right? About whether Hank is right, whether Hickey is right. But I think, man, maybe this episode is more thoughtful than we initially gave it credit. How about that?
Yeah. No, I mean, I never thought, I never once thought it wasn't. I think it says the ending. I think is quite poignant that these two people, as sort of venomous as their relationship seems to be, can't seem to be without one another,
Sure.
and also don't want to be with each other. And that is a relationship that a lot of families have.
Sure.
I think my relationship with my mother is akin to something like this. It's not that I want to be in her presence all the time. I don't, but I do deeply care for my mom in some, sort of humanistic way that I feel like I have to. That's always going to be there. And if it were like my dad, the difference would be like my dad left when I was 7. That's
Okay.
the last time I really saw my dad. He came back when I was like 12, and then again when I was, oh my God, 27 ish.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's the last time I saw him. And that is a person I don't give a fuck, like he could
Sure.
be dead right now and I would not know. So whatever. But that's a relationship people have with a parent is complicated. as a lot
Sure.
of people I'm sure know. And this shows that. This is like a complicated relationship. These two can't stand one another, but they also can't not stand one another. So it's like it's a weird sort of column they put themselves in that a lot of people do. And I think
Yeah.
that's a quite poignant ending.
Yeah. And it reminds me, I mean, this feels very Bluthian, right? The way Michael cannot quit his family, even though he would probably be, but it's again like that sustaining of that antagonism, right? And again, this is what thinking of the end of this episode as a metaphor for really our relationships with stories and how it's not so much that we don't want stories to end. It's just this recognition that when the story ends, the conflict ends, and that's the thing that we do not want to end. It's the sustaining of that conflict that makes all great stories so wonderful. Boy, I don't know. Let's hard transition maybe to some of the sillier parts of the episode, John.
Okay.
So Abed established this in the last D&D episode. He is not good with names. And I know this is something that I think you spoke about in the last episode. It is uncommon, it seems,
Yeah.
for a dungeon master to just pick names and characters. Correct me if I'm wrong. Players bring their own characters to a particular match. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, you do. When you create your character, you roll all their different abilities and you name them and you figure out their race. I think he does that to save time.
Sure.
He does have some wild names. One you wrote down Nuggets, but it's actually Nuggins, Nuggins. I changed it for you.
Oh, I
That
thought it
is,
was Tiny Nuggets. Okay, it's
no,
Tiny Nuggins.
Nuggins. Crouton is a great name.
Crouton, the half-orc
Fibrosis,
crude.
which I
Yeah.
think is a back disease. Fibrosis is the Ranger.
Yeah, yeah.
Tristram Steelheart is like a name that you would give a paladin. So that works. Hector the Well Endowed is
Hector's
the
back.
best name
Yeah.
that's ever been given to a character.
Hector's back, yeah.
My character's
Dingleberry-
name. Do what?
Dingleberry the troll.
Dingleberry
Chang
the troll, which is great.
is
My favorite
Dingleberry.
line is when Chang says, "That's my mom's nickname for me." I love that. What a line!
And these other two, the two maybe like protagonists for this story.
So obviously he's just watched Looper, is what
Yes,
we can gather.
that's what I was thinking,
That
yeah.
Abed's just seen Looper.
Looper and Lethal Weapon, I think. Because
yeah, 'cause
we have
Riggs,
Sir
I
Riggs
forgot.
Die Hard. Yeah, Sir Riggs Die Hard and Joseph Gordon Die Hard.
Joseph Gordon Die Hard. I always forget that he was young Bruce Willis, and I always forget that.
That's correct. Yeah. So,
Makeup
these
did
names
not
are-
look good. He did not look great in the film Looper. I'll go ahead and say that.
I don't know if I've seen Looper.
Great flick. Really good flick.
That's what I've heard.
Once you get past the weird Joseph Gordon Die Hard stuff.
I'm trying to remember what I did because I really wanted to watch it the weekend it came out. Huh. I watched Far and Away. Now I remember.
Okay.
John.
Yeah, he wanted to
yeah.
do that,
See,
you
I
fucking
did. I
asshole.
do. I know. Yeah.
We should talk about the split diopter shot. That's what you want to talk about with the
Oh,
goblin.
it's so beautiful. Yeah, the split diopter. So this is a cool thing that you see in is it All the President's Men, I think?
Yeah, it's in there.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah.
I want to say like Renoir, maybe Renoir was like really good about deep focus. He was the first person
Yeah.
to sort of use that, and I know Hitchcock did it a lot. But
Mission
for those of you that-
Impossible has a great split diopter.
It does. It's all done
Yeah.
in camera now, which is a bummer because
Yeah.
it used to be. They used to
Lenses.
literally put like a piece of board over the lens, so they
And-
draw the lens in half and they'd shoot it.
Yeah,
one at a time.
And as I understand it, you're right. Now it's all through camera. Like there are just special lenses that one can use
Oh, yeah,
to
yeah,
produce
yeah.
that effect as well. But yeah, no, John, can you? I can do this, but if you want, describe it to us. What is the split diopter? What does it do?
Well, it's the shot where Hickey is talking to Abed, and it's designed to look like they're in the same frame, or sort of sitting next to each other, when in reality Hickey is behind him, and it really fucks with your It fucks with your brain a little bit. One of my favorite ones in recent memory is from the Jordan Peele film Us. At the end of Us, there's a split diopter where
cool.
Lupita Nyong'o and her doppelganger are having a conversation, and she is in the back, and it really fucks with your sense of space.
Yeah.
And the way that they do it with this, because, and I love this, Hickey was a police investigator. So they're filming this as if he is interrogating these two goblins. Yeah. And he figures out how to good cop, bad cop them to get them to turn on each other by talking about how bad the wedding food was at the hobgoblin's wedding, which turned into him realizing the other hobgoblin was in love with the bride. So, great shit. Great shot. Great shot.
Yeah, lovely shot. I mean, in Mission Impossible, it's when Tom Hanks, the Ethan Hunt character, hangs
Tom
from the
Hanks.
ceiling.
Can we make sure that Colin said Tom Hanks? Can you mark that down?
Did I say
that Colin said Tom Hanks? I'm trying to hang here.
He did all the stunt work for Mission Impossible. Very few people know that. It's Tom Cruise as Ethan Hunt. When he's hanging, and then that operator, like his face is in the foreground. It's. I mean, as you said, the effect is basically to remove the middle ground. So when people, like that's kind of the effect, is that it removes the middle ground, basically.
Yeah, thinking about that, because De Palma directed that. I remember those shots a lot in Blowout. I just realized,
I bet there's
a fuck ton of those in Blowout.
Yeah. I mean,
what a flick, by the way. What a flick! Everybody go watch Blowout. Oh my god!
Yeah, I mean, this feels like something you would see from like 70s American Renaissance, because again, this is something I don't recall who directs All the President's Men. This is something you see like. All the President's Men, I think, is one of the greatest examples of just using that particular lens and that particular shot over and over again. As you said, it I don't necessarily know if it produces paranoia, but it produces this sensation that something is off, and that's perfect for that movie about two journalists basically investigating the president. So it's just a beautiful shot. I think you're right. Perfect for a moment when a character interrogates another character. And we see, again, of course, Hickey is perfect for this because of his law enforcement background. And I think there's even a reference later in the episode, John, to Hickey waterboarding them. Like, boy, oh boy, that's not great, but it makes sense. So
it's on brand for him. I do want to talk about the way that Russo. And again, I didn't think the episode was funny, but I do think the production is really good, especially when they are filming the battle sequences and the way that Russo is using the camera as if you are in the battle watching it happen. It's really great. There's a lot of great swish cuts back and forth, swipes back and forth. It's great, and it makes me happy that this show still can find things like that to do this far into its run. I really like
There's
that.
a lot of Dutch tilting. There's a lot of cool panning, a lot of pulling and pushing, which is really nice. And it's interesting because, John, we've been in this space so many times. Abed's apartment, I mean, the way that it creates, I mean, the apartment itself has a lot of these yellows and browns and oranges, and you can see the whole episode feels that way. But using what is admittedly a limited space, so how can we make something feel dynamic in this space? Well, you need to do a lot of tight shots, and you basically need to tilt the camera and push and move the camera in really exciting and dynamic ways. That's another reason why I think I like this episode upon this serious consideration, is they use what is admittedly a restrictive space in super dynamic ways, just by shifting just by making the camera as energetic as possible, which that's how I like to think about it. The camera has so much energy in this particular episode.
Yeah, for sure, and it helps. The pace gets the pace starts frenetic, and then it takes a breather when we get this sort of music video interlude where we find out that Joseph Gordon Diehard, if he rubs his hilt of his sword, if he masturbates the blade of his sword while his dad rubs the hilt of his sword, their beams will cross and they'll see each other because the party gets split at the beginning of the game. And so we get what is essentially, like I said earlier, a song from Lord of the Rings where David Cross's beautiful voice is singing this sort of elvish incantation. And we also end on, I don't even know how to talk about what's happening with the Dean. It's filmed in the wildest focus. The focus is like on his eyes for a lot. It's almost like a horror movie. It's like a Marilyn Manson video with the blues when he's standing there and he's writing a bunch of letters. I didn't notice this the first time, but I love this joke. He's writing a letter to give to his dad, but Abed keeps failing the roll, so they're throwing it away. So that's why he keeps ripping strips of his shirt off. So when we see him, half of his fucking shirt's gone because Abed nails a perfect 20 there at the end. That's right. It was great.
I mean, the camera seems to have this, like, film on it or something, you know? Like, everything is... grain, it's like, it's hazy. I mean, it feels like... I mean, you and I, we've talked about this before, like... To produce that effect in old Hollywood, they would just put like Vaseline on the lens, you know, and that's what this feels like. I sincerely doubt they put Vaseline on the lens here, or maybe they did because perhaps they had a lot of lubrication because of all the masturbation jokes.
It also looks a lot like the Hobbit movies Peter Jackson did.
Oh, yeah,
you know.
Well, his was about what did he do differently in those that I'm trying?
Oh, he shot on a frame rate that was supposed to be like the frame rate of how your eye actually sees things. But then when they sent it out, all the projectioners are like, we don't have this projector. So then it just looked like a regular movie. It was weird.
That part of it is time. Like when he would pan. So like when you shoot, I'm trying to think what is the traditional frame rate. I cannot recall. But like things are blurry, right? Because that's it's the frame rate's distorted. When when there's like pans in those Jackson movies, it's like nothing's distorted. So it's all really clear. It's all really, really weird. Like your brain doesn't know what to do with it because that's not what a traditional frame rate does, which is what all of our brains are acclimated to. Yeah, it's some of it feels that way too. So John, the episode really seems to culminate or crescendo with this series of deaths, which either feels like a Game of Thrones episode or let us say like an old Elizabethan tragedy like Titus Andronicus, because everyone just dies in quick succession, you know, like that's it. It feels like the end of a Shakespeare tragedy with like one character after another dying.
Yeah, they start with this like Mexican standoff.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah,
and then it ends with them all in a massive battle, which is over very quickly. Well, actually, it starts with. It reminds me of Reservoir Dogs. That's what I was thinking when I watched it, because there's the moment so like this starts with
that's pretty good.
The Dean walking towards his dad, and his dad impales him. Jeff impales his son and kills him.
We have to talk about this. The fact that there is nothing the Dean has wanted more than for Jeff to impale him, right?
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so he impales him, and then that's when all hell breaks loose. And if you haven't seen Reservoir Dogs, spoiler alert for a film that's 22 years old.
Sure. I totally forgot about this. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah.
There's a standoff, and Harvey Keitel, Mr. White, is holding his gun on Nice Guy Eddie. And Nice Guy Eddie's son, played by the late Chris Penn, yells, "Stop pointing that gun at my dad!" And then all hell breaks loose.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
They all shoot each other. That's what it reminded me of.
Yeah,
very
I mean,
quick,
again,
fast, bing, 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 and that's
like
it. Yeah,
the end of Hamlet basically works this way. It's
absolutely.
like
Yeah,
Gertrude. God, can I get it in sequence? It's like Gertrude, Claudius. Who's Polonius's son? Who Hamlet fights? I cannot.
Laertes. Is it?
It is
Laertes?
Laertes. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Laertes, then Hamlet. Like, yeah, quick succession.
Bing, bang, boom.
Horatio tries to kill himself, but Hamlet stays his hand. So it would have been 5. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also got those vibes when I watched it as well.
yeah. I know.
Maybe Red Wedding. That's a
Well, because
possibility.
Britta makes, that's what I was thinking, John. Like Britta, she actually says that line about things getting red, I think, at one point. And boy, I don't, how do you not think of Game of Thrones? What, John, 2014, where was Game of Thrones?
It would have Red Wedding's in season 3. Yeah, it's in season 3.
So Game of Thrones, I'm checking. This will take me, no, I got there. So Game of Thrones, you said Red Wedding season 3?
I believe so. Yes.
That was 2012. So
it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a pretty big moment for the zeitgeist for you youngins out there that weren't around when the Red Wedding hit. People hadn't read about it. But this is not nearly as, I don't know. No. Like there's no, the Red Wedding was like such a surprise. Sure. That's what it was. It was like so visceral. And this is just, I'm announcing to you, I'm going to murder you now. I think it's a Hamlet play a lot more. I love that. Yeah.
I mean, it feels more Hamlet, I guess. Yeah, I mean, there's not really, there's basically a sword fight at the end of Hamlet, with like a poisoned blade tip and everything.
Yeah.
But I think I told you, I didn't know this until I read the, Game of Thrones books. I didn't realize, what Ned's son, who's the king who dies there, what's his name?
Robb Stark.
Like his wife isn't actually there in the books.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, she's not there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
that's pretty fucked up.
Yeah, I know because
she got stabbed in her pregnant belly. That was the biggest thing.
Because it all starts with like pregnant belly stabbing.
Oh it was fucking nuts.
Yeah.
Oh,
I know.
What a show! What a show! It's great they only did 6 seasons of that. You know.
I've heard good things. Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Can we talk about Abed as a dungeon master? So Hickey, early in the episode, John, well, there are 2 things. Hickey complains, and then Abed offers this really concise but interesting explanation that, well, have you ever been 3 feet tall in, 2 feet of weeds trying to punch someone who's several feet taller than you? You know, it's like you clearly don't understand the game mechanics because you do not seem to take it seriously. And then at the end, Hickey says, you owe us an ending. And Abed says, you all basically performed a red wedding outside of a necromancer's home. You cannot be surprised that, 1, they heard it, and then 2, upon hearing it, fled. And I like this because it does feel like Abed's almost pathological commitment to good stories needing to be rational and logical stories, which we know all stories are not. But this is one of those times where you do need to adhere to the rules. And I mean, even thinking about, I think there was a 7th season of Game of Thrones, John, if I recall correctly. Some people suggest there isn't. But this idea that I think, no, this might have happened near the end of season 6 when Dany's in one location, but then she's somehow magically in another location.
No, I think that might be an 8, actually.
Okay.
There was an 8th season, which is remarkably worse than all the other ones. But yes,
I've heard there's an 8th season. I've never seen it, so I don't know if that's true. But
it's whispered about on the internet.
It's there are whispers on the wind that there is an 8th season. You shouldn't watch it. But I think this is one of those times where we see why it's important maybe to be slavishly committed to certain rules, because Abed's right. I mean, when you do something stupid like they do, you cannot be surprised if your main antagonist just then runs away, right?
Yeah, I think that's the hallmark of a very good DM. I think Abed's really good at what he does, especially gauging how Hank is and knowing that Hank is trying to be a wild card. I think that that releases Abed from having to keep a narrative the way that it should be and saying, okay, well, if you would like to do it that way, we're going to do it that way. And it's really good. It's good. He's great in this. He's one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite Abed moments. I think he's really fucking funny as the goblins. Just his voices and the way he does his face. He's very enjoyable. Like I said, it's a very enjoyable show. I just don't think it's a very rewatchable episode, is what I'll say.
Yeah, I would agree, because again, all of the interesting ruminations about the nature of storytelling notwithstanding, it is not a particularly funny episode. I mean, there is this, John, maybe the funniest moment when Hank says a little place that rhymes with not there, and Chang says Times Square. That shit's hilarious. Yeah,
It's so good.
That was perfect. John, I don't know. Is there anything else? I think we've discussed everything. Yeah.
That's it. I'm looking forward to G.I. Jeff is our next episode, and I know that it is like fucking hated by everybody. And right here above me, this shelf, Colin, those are all G.I. Joes because I was obsessed as a child, and these are all them. So
can I tell
I'm pretty
you this?
stoked about it.
I'll tell you this. I love G.I. Jeff. I don't get why people hate this episode. I love it so much. It's a really good episode, I would argue. I'll go ahead and say that. I like it a lot.
People seem to very much dislike it, so I'm looking forward to seeing how they handle that. That was my favorite cartoon as a child, so I'm pretty stoked for it.
Well, I'm going to say this. These community fans who have a restrictive understanding of what a good community episode is, I don't know if we should trust them, John. I think they I don't know if they have a perspective that I would necessarily endorse. So I'll say that. Sorry if you're sorry. I'll go ahead
Colin
and apologize.
Is taking the gloves off. Colin, that is our conversation for season 5, episode
What can
10.
I say? I'm basically a bare knuckle boxer, like Tom Cruise's character in Far and Away.
Yeah,
John, let us transition.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Let us transition, Colin. Yes. To some of our segments. Read them to me. What are they, please?
Well, I didn't write them down, but I know them. John, the Dean's List.
Yes.
This is where we identify our favorite or best performance. What do you got?
Oh, this is a hard one. It was going to be Abed, but I think it's Dean Pelton for me. Okay. He gives it his all. He's fucking funny, and he does jerk off a sword. So mine is Dean Pelton. What about you?
I think mine, it's actually Chang. I think Chang is surprisingly funny in this episode.
When he just yells troll noise, it's so good.
He's really good. Yeah. And you,
that's so good.
Yeah. That's what my mom calls me. Isn't that the joke? It's
my
really
best.
funny.
It's my favorite line. It's the only line I wrote down. It's the best line. I love that line.
Yeah. John, I also need you to check the syllabus because I need you to identify your favorite bit of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. What do you got?
It's the Lord of the Rings song in the middle of the episode. It's fucking awesome. It's done incredibly well, and I loved it. Colin, what about you?
So Pippin's song is called Edge of Night.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that.
There's a lot of edging in that sequence.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, mine, I think all the Looper references, like, I think you're right. Abed clearly watched Looper the weekend before. So, yeah, I think
absolutely.
That's mine. I think that's mine. John, I need to hear, you have a best line. Let's hear it.
I have one best line. Let me get to my notepad. I was seeing who directed All the President's Men. It's a person I don't know, but it was written by William Goldman, who I believe wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and he wrote The Princess Bride. That's what I thought. What a flick that is, also, Princess Bride.
Okay, sorry. I was thinking of the Anne Hathaway film when you said The Princess Bride.
Not The Princess Diaries.
I think my blood.
I love that.
Low.
Fucking love that.
My
flick.
blood sugar's low. Yeah.
Yeah. This is my one line. I'm a troll named Dingleberry. That's my mom's nickname for me, and he was so proud of that. A dingleberry, for those of you that don't know, is referencing when there is dookie in your butthole.
Well, yeah.
Anyway.
So like, I mean, I always have difficulty pronouncing his name. The guy who directed All the President's Men, Alan J. Is it Polka?
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen him. Yeah.
I mean, so he directed The Parallax View, Sophie's Choice. This guy, he's very good. John, I
directed some really funny movies. Sophie's Choice.
It's
hilarious.
It's a romantic comedy. Will she go with the wild and crazy guy or the straight-laced, button-up, boring guy? Yeah, that's Sophie's Choice. John, yeah, some of my favorite lines. Hank's a knob. That's a line of Hickey's. Dude, this is a Jeff line. Fabulous, Neil. Felt like a nobody. And thanks to us, he's out there doing this and that in the background. And you actually see
him in the background,
yeah. Are we losing? It's not a competition. The only winner is fun. We're having fun. That's an exchange between Hickey and Annie. But it's okay. I'm on your side, which is why I'm dead. That's something Shirley says. It's very funny. But you know where he was for most of my birthdays? Oh, a little place that rhymes with not there. Times Square. Very funny. Favorite line of the episode. Yeah. Each night I will think of you and rub. That's something the Dean says. Abed, I rub my sword's hilt. That's something I believe the Dean says. And finally, you guys cool, or are we going to have to get red? That's something Britta says. Again, I think she's making a reference to the red wedding. John, conversation, community, 5,
That's
10.
It.
Advanced, Dungeons, Dragons. I don't need conjunctions. Patreon page we have.
Oh shit!
Now I'm Yoda. Okay,
I forgot
John,
about it.
Do a thing.
We have a Patreon page. Colin is slowly fading into non-existence like a Force ghost at the end of Return of the Jedi.
Or like Marty's siblings.
Oh yeah,
Back to the Future.
Your Marty's brother and sister. Yeah. So we have a Patreon page.
My hand is gone.
For $3 a month, you get all the exclusive bonus content. For $7 a month, you get the content, a sticker. You become producer of the show. Become producer of the show. We talk about how much we love you every single episode. Above that, you get a T-shirt, a sticker, producer. Above that, I don't know. You come over, hang out. We'll have a cookout. You want to fucking crush some dogs? I'll do that. Whatever you want. Colin, I should say, by the way, I listened to our very first Patreon episode yesterday. I was in a nostalgic mood. You know what it was?
No.
It's the time. It's 10 minutes long. It's when we ate Parmesan and mustard.
Oh God! Yes,
yeah. 5 years
awful.
ago. That was 5 fucking years ago that we did that.
That was pretty awful. Yeah, I remember because didn't I bring fancy.
You brought a fancy mustard and Parmesan, but you also brought French's yellow.
The way Job does it. Yeah.
The way Job does it. And we ate that, and it was very bad. So if you want to hear me literally dry heave on a podcast, head on back. 5 years worth of great content on there.
If I remember, the fancy Parmesan, the stone ground mustard, and like the like water crackers, that was pretty good. That
was a fantastic little snack. Yes,
that was a nice snack. But yeah,
my mouth had been coated by the filth, so I didn't want to have any more
because it created like a paste. Right?
Oh God, it was so bad.
Yeah, if you watch, is this season 4 of Arrested Development? Job, because he's so poor, he just eats Parmesan and mustard, right?
I believe so.
Yellow mustard.
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. No, John,
that's what
we have producers. They helped pay for that delicious snack 5 years ago. John, thank you to the following producers of the Hop-Ons podcast. Thank you to Katana, Crindy, Rachel, Kate, Rob, Robin, Jeff, and Andrew. And John's right. The Patreon link is the first link in the show notes. John, our Threadless link, if anyone wanted to buy Hop-Ons podcast merchandise, is the second link in the show notes. And John, if someone were so inclined to rate and review the podcast, what would you say? And what would I say?
Well, it would be very nice. It helps the show get noticed, and we would read your review here on the air. It's been a while since we've had a review. Somebody get out there, crack your knuckles, type us up a nice review. Let me read it. Write whatever you want me to say. You could write the whole fucking Gettysburg Address. I'll read that shit. Maybe not all of it. Probably. Right here on the air.
I don't think it's that long, though, if I remember correctly. So
then that one I will read. Not like anything by like Dostoevsky. I won't do that, but
no.
Anyway, Colin, are you okay? Are you good?
That'll send him underground. I think that's a reference to a Dostoevsky novella. Anyway, no, I'm definitely dropping. I need to go eat something. John, what was I? Oh yeah, no, like Spotify. We've gotten some nice reviews on Spotify, but they can't. You can't or ratings on Spotify, but you can't leave reviews on Spotify.
You can't leave it. Spotify's stupid for that. Anyway, we love you all. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, for the Hop-Ons podcast, my name is John Phelps.
My name is Colin Cox.
All right, bye, buddy.
See ya.